going to do the Torah portion from this past week. We're not going to catch up on the Torah portions. That's not my goal anyway. Just to sort of reach into the Torah and pick out those things that really relate to our practice, which is almost everything. But sort of get the primary ones. And this past Torah portion, Vayetze, is really loaded with meditation stuff, right? So I thought rather than have a 40-minute lesson, I'll do a 20-minute lesson, 15, 20 minutes, and then do another lesson next week to finish this portion from last week, Vayetze. So it's Genesis 28:10. And I'll just read the beginning of it here. And Jacob left Beersheba and went to Haran. He came upon the place. He spent the night there because the sun had set. He took some stones of that place and placed them around his body and head, and then lay down in that place to sleep. He had a dream. He beheld a ladder standing firmly on the ground and sloping upward, its top reaching up towards heaven. Angels of God were ascending it and descending it. And behold, God was standing over him. I am God, God of Abraham, your forebear, and God of Isaac. I will give the land upon which you are lying to you and your descendants. So that's what I'm going to read from the Torah. You can see this is quite a mystical experience that Jacob has. It's commonly called Jacob's Ladder. Rock songs have been written about it. So it's pretty special throughout the ages, right? And really it begins to introduce us to this Kabbalistic principle of directions, up, down, north, south, east, west, like that. And most of you have studied the Sefer Yetzirah with me. If not, you might want to get that link from Jack. We talk about it quite a lot in there. And the basic idea of it is that from this unbounded, really undifferentiated place of Ein Sof, pure consciousness, absolute unified field, emanates, like we talk about all the time, creates, forms, acts. All of those things happen from this unbounded space. And as they happen from there, they happen in a particular order with a particular directions involved with them. So they go in one way, it goes in another way, it goes. So now we're going from a field of absoluteness to a field of boundaries, to a field of relative existence, where things change and things move in a certain direction. I find it helpful to think of those things as just natural law. It's nature's way. So Ein Sof has this, desire to create and become relative. A part of it is consciousness. And that's the essence of all of the relative, Ein Sof itself, or pure consciousness. But the Torah is giving us sort of a description of how to experience, how to engage that essence. So we use these bumper sticker things, engage the essence, things like that. But what we're really saying here is that these stories, these metaphors, allegory in the Torah is showing us, giving us instruction, which the Torah really means, as to how that is happening. And it's continually happening. It's not like there was just one blast of creation. Creation is something that happens in every moment, right? So from the beginning the middle, the end, the beginning, the middle, and end. There's these sort of creationary experiences that are always going on in natural law. And as they're going on, they form what we call these feedback loops. So it's circles within circles within circles, ever expanding circles within circles within circles. And quantum physics really pretty much is what I call the new arm of Kabbalistic thinking, because they are saying things that the Kabbalistic masters have said for generations, right? So let's take a look at this portion, the first part of it, and let's take a look at it from the perspective of Simeon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Zohar, we think. And he has some interesting things to share on it. So let's see what he says. As Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran. As the sun emerges from the east, so Jacob went out from Beersheba. And as the sun turns towards the west, so Jacob went toward Haran. When the sun goes down to the west is called the place of the sun and his throne, the place in which he abides. And he lighted upon this place, and he took of the stones of the place. This is an allusion to the 12 precious and wondrous stones of the upper layer, of which it is written, take you 12 stones, and put them under his head. The plural form shows here that we should refer the his head not to Jacob alone, but to the place, and understanding the heads to be the 4 cardinal points of the world. He arranged the stones there to the north, 3 to the north, 3 to the west, 3 to the south, and 3 to the east. And that place or spot was above them, so that it should be established on them. Therefore he lay down in that place to sleep. For now that the couch was properly arranged, namely the sun lay down on it. Thus the words, he lay down in that place to sleep. The sun arises and the sun comes in. So if we think of this book that Simeon Bar Yochai wrote and relate it to the Sefer Yetzirah and to our own personal experience, we take a deeper look at what Jacob is saying, or what Moses is saying about this experience of Jacob, right, in the Torah. So it says here, and behold, God was standing over him. So he placed these stones. Now, if you remember, and God here, when it says, behold, God was standing over him, the Hebrew form is of God here is Yud He Vav He. But then it goes on further to say, God of your father Isaac, and it's used Elohai, and God of Abraham, his father, also Elohai. So in the Sefer Yetzirah, Yud He Vav He is the first of the names, and then the second is Elohai. So this is coming out of the oneness of Ein Sof, the God standing over him. So his experience, the stones relate to the letters, Yud He Vav He. And the stones relate to the letters. The 3 stones are called the triad, Yud He Vav. So when I end our meditations, and I was taught this a really long time ago, so I end my meditation this way, and I've taught it to people in these levels, but when we meditate together, this past year I've begun to close the meditations with this instruction. And it comes from this particular portion. So as it comes from this portion, I'll also read it from the Sefer Yetzirah, so you have an understanding of it. We like to call it the sealing of the directions, but in the Sefer Yetzirah, I think the probably best translation is Kaplan's, which he says the sealing of the extremities. But going back to chapter 1, verse 5, where the Sefer Yetzirah begins to discuss how things emanate and create from oneness into diversity. It discusses the dimensions in 1:5. A depth of beginning, a depth of end. So that's a time-space continuum, beginning and end, a dimension of time. A depth of above, a depth of below, a depth east, a depth west, a depth north, a depth south. The singular master, God, faithful King, dominates them all from his holy dwelling until eternity of eternities. That's a critical point in what we're experiencing in our meditation and what the Torah is telling us. So the diversity in what I talked about as this feedback loop always comes back to unity. So we have this diversity expanding and expanding, but each circle of that expansion is a feedback loop into unity. And that's what Jacob is experiencing here. So he takes these three stones, and whether this happened or whether it's a myth doesn't matter to us, because it's really an instruction as to what we're doing, experiencing the oneness from the Holy of Holies, and how through natural law it becomes many, one becoming many, right? So he takes this, and how that happens is the Aleph represents that pure Ein Sof, pure high consciousness in the Holy of Holies, the well of being deep within us. And Yud, Vav, and Hey, Yud percolates it, energizes it. It's the catalyst for it to move. Vav is the channel with which it moves, and Hey is the receiver of it. And that's the continuous feedback loop that happens, that's happening with Jacob. So he sets up these three stones in all these directions, right? So 3 stones in the east, 3 stones in the west, 3 stones in the south, 3 stones in the north. I'll read that. Sefer Yetzirah, verse 13. With 3 of the simple letters, seal above. Choose 3 and place them in his great name, Yud He Vav. With them seal the 6 extremities. Face upward and seal it with Yud Hav He. Face below and face downward and seal it with Yud Vav He. Face straight ahead and seal it with He Yud Vav. Face backward and seal it with He Vav Yud. That's west. Face south, face to the right and seal it with Vav Yud He. Face north, face to the left and seal it with Vav He Yud. Of course, in the center is the whole name, Yud He Vav He, the togetherness of it. So this whole experience, he's laying out these things, is a meditative experience. So he has his meditation with Yud, Vav, and He, all the triads, and Yud, He, Vav, He, centering himself. And he sleeps with his head on this rock. And then what happens? He sees these angels ascending and descending, running and returning. This is also related to the meditative experience completely. And this is what we have in our meditative experience, running and returning. So we sit, we shut our mouths, right? We don't talk about all the narratives and all the things, that part of our brain that figures things out. We don't use that, right? So it's not a chatty time for us. It's a quiet time for us. And it's also not a time where we figure anything out or use any narratives. And when we do that, the letters allow us to transcend and experience that oneness that's within us. So in the Sefer Yetzirah, in chapter 1, verse 8, 10 separate of nothingness. Bridle your mouth from speaking and your heart from thinking. This is what I just described. You'll have thoughts. This is not what the Sefer Yetzirah is saying. But you don't use the part of your brain that figures it out. You just witness the thoughts. That's a big confusion throughout the ages. We're not trying to stop thinking. We're just trying to stop reasoning. It's not a theosophical practice. It's an experience of vibrations, right? His word in them is running and returning. It's like a vision of lightning. The limit has no end. His word in them is running and returning. They rush to his sayings like a whirlwind, and before his throne they prostrate themselves. Their end is embedded in their beginning is embedded in their end. So you can see this feedback circle that I'm talking about. So if we go back to the Zohar, and I'll conclude, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, seeing that all will then be united into one. And the stone will be blessed from the right and from the left, from above and from below. So that's the final expression of engaging the essence. So the singular stone, we go beyond all the letters and experience pure consciousness. The letters are a vehicle. They come out and make directions and the relative sphere of existence. And then we use them for the feedback loop, running, returning, running, returning. And there's all levels of relative. There's the grossest relative and the finest relative just before you drop into the cosmic ocean, just before you drop into the sea. Okay? Well, I hope that makes sense to you in light of our meditation experiences. And I'm going to talk about next week, finish this Torah portion where Jacob meets Rachel and removes the rock from the well, which is obviously also a metaphor for our meditation practice.